Shall we make a start and then I'll add some people in when they arrive?
Let's go for it. Great. Yes. So welcome everyone. Hello. Nice to see lots of faces on here. People, thank you for taking some time out of your days to listen to me talk a bit about attracting young adults with learning difficulties and autism into the workplace. I appreciate that everyone will be really busy at the moment, so it's really helpful to have a bit of your time to sort of showcase a little bit about what's been happening here at Harrogate. There are some familiar faces in terms of the screen I can see in front of us of people who I know. But for those who don't know me, I'm Jordan Mackay. I'm currently Acting Director of Finance here at Harrogate and District NHS Foundation Trust, refer to ourselves as HDFT. Some of you can probably tell from the accent, I am not a North Yorkshire person. I come from the Northeast, so I've been in the NHS for over 10 years now. So and enjoying the role at HDFT. We were a relatively small acute trust. As a bit of background for us, we've expanded our footprint a bit over recent years to be a sort of about a 325 million organisation. We've got about 5,000 staff, and you might think as us as just a little hospital in Harrogate. We actually provide a vast array of services from Settle to Scarborough, from Wakefield up to Berwick. And I mention that because it's probably quite important to some of the topic we're going to go through. Part of our expansion's been in terms of children and young people services, 0 to 19 services across that patch. We're one of the bigger providers in the country now. People don't necessarily expect that. We're quite a unique trust in that bit. We therefore have a workforce that isn't just about Harrogate and North Yorkshire. It's about North Yorkshire, the northeast of England, and everything else. And we have clearly need to represent that workforce, but also we have the sort of challenge that face in terms of recruiting, etc., to that sort of footprint. And amongst that expansion of our services, we sort of updated our trust values. We have a sort of fancy kite logo that you can sort of see next to me a little bit that's been broken up a bit, but our values are around kindness, integrity, teamwork, and then finally around equality. And when we were doing the bit of work across our sort of staffing around engagement, equality really came through, that kind of strength of feeling around equality, diversity, inclusion. And you guys have joined this, so you will no doubt already know the benefits that you can have from a diverse workforce, the positive impact you can have from the EDI agenda in terms of your workforce. There's loads of evidence out there, which I'm not going to go through because I'm assuming you've joined this knowing a bit of that already. The specific bit of work that I was just going to talk through a bit, and I haven't got slides, so unfortunately you've got my face on your screen talking at you for a bit of time, is around the brilliant work that we've been part of as a trust that is led by Project Search, which helps people with learning disabilities and autism to get into the workplace. And I was just saying to Natasha before this isn't necessarily Harrogate showcasing what we're doing. This is about sharing with you some of the benefits that we've had from the Project Search agenda, in particular in the finance team. So just in terms of a bit of background in terms of what Project Search is, it's a pre-employment programme for young people with learning difficulties, which allows them to gain meaningful experience of work. You know, people who have learning disabilities, learning difficulties, autism, this can be significant, lifelong, starts before adulthood and affects people's development. And a lot of this is then the work that Project Search do is about bringing people into the workplace and preparing people for work who might not necessarily previously have done. In terms of people who are registered with a learning disability with their local authority, there is about 1.1 million people across the UK. Only 5% of those people are in meaningful work. That means there's about 1 million people out there with skills that we're not really tapping into as a workforce. Compared to their peers, 80% of people typically are in meaningful work. So there is a real difference there and a real inequality to address to work through some of this. The whole programme of Project Search originates in America from 1996. It's now in lots of locations across the UK. And their approach is a real multi-agency approach. So involves partners across education, the employer, local authority, support and employment agency, and Project Search themselves. And all of it is around the goal of supporting learners into employment. There's a real focus, and I'll come on to what we've done in the finance team. There's a real focus on, for interns, building and developing employability skills and ensuring people are ready for employment. Project Search has got an overall aim that by 2030, they will have supported 10,000 young adults who have either a learning disability or on the autism spectrum to be in paid employment in the UK. And so far, it's about a fifth of the way through that. So they've still got lots of work to do, but it is a really positive area. What's involved? It's a one-year program for interns. They're usually between the ages of 17 and 24. Typically have a AHCP in place or another form of assessment, education, health and care plan. Can be college students, and it's really appropriate for business. Just need, in terms of checks around things, there's a bit around passing the necessary pre-employment checks. All of this is supported by Project Search. So where previously we might have had things like apprentices or other things in place, that's not something for your kind of HR team to deal with. That's all sort of picked up sort of through Project Search. And the interns themselves rotate through 3 building opportunities with continual feedback, with the aim of the outcome of employment at the end. It's in terms of Harrogate, it's a partnership between us and our local college as well as Project Search. And we've had some really good input from the college on this. It's helped build our relationships with the local college, which, again, thinking beyond just what we're talking about here, there's a real link there in terms of how we can gain future workforce for our trust. And a number of you will have already heard about Project Search in your organisations. I'm not sat here claiming that we're the first in the country around this at all. There's lots of Project Search sites. We're the latest one. One thing that myself and Karen, who's on here, who when we've been looking into this, that was sort of picked up through one NHS Finance, was around, actually, it's quite unique for finance departments, and we haven't picked up on anything that finance departments have engaged with Project Search. Typically, talking to Project Search, it's around portering, catering, domestic sort of roles across organisations, and we found it really valuable in finance, and I'm sure sort of colleagues could share that with areas like HR, medical records, a lot of sort of corporate functions that across the board. We're benefiting across the board from having a cohort of young adults who struggle to access the employment market and therefore they experience greater inequalities. And often this is the first experience that these colleagues have of a working environment. In terms of how it came about at HDFT Harrogate, it was sort of catalysed by our director of strategy, a gentleman who some of you might know called Matt Graham, been known across West Yorkshire. He's our director of strategy. He opened the door, and I've already mentioned Karen. She's in the top left of my screen. She might be in a different place of your screen. Karen has been really key in the finance department of pulling this sort of link together for us. And interns, they've been really keen to be part of the team and support tasks. Each rotation lasts 10 weeks. And at the end of all of this, in terms of the support that's provided, not just to the intern, but there's support of getting people straight into work, ongoing relationship in that new workplace, ongoing liaison with employers, and for us, a bit of advice about how we make reasonable adjustments in future, which has been invaluable, actually. So a bit about kind of opportunities for your team if you sort of take on a sort of link with sort of Project Search in this. As I've already mentioned, the sort of recruitment process. There is a bit of Project Search do all of the legwork around some of this for you. There's lots of infrastructure around the individual. The intern's fully supported. They've got training and support from their job coaches on an ongoing basis. Each morning, our interns have met with their job coach to prepare for their day. They provide coordination, make sure that they're in the right place at the right time. There's a bit of work about employability skills that sort of feeds through that. They have a conduit to allow them to raise issues, get feedback, and I'll come on to that in a bit. And a bit of sort of coordination on site to make sure everything goes smoothly. If you pick up Project Search, you're supported to do all this. People keep telling me that you've got to put a bit of effort in to start with, and as I mentioned before, there's lots of sort of routes for employment of staff where you have to put a bit of effort in. Actually, this has been one of the sort of more streamlined things that we've picked up in our recent past at Harrogate. In terms of opportunities for the team, some of the sort of feedback that we've had that feeds through, it's a real chance to feel like you're enhancing someone's life and providing them with a launch pad, which will allow them to follow their chosen career path. A real opportunity to improve diversity at all levels, creation of a more inclusive environment. And if I think about the change in my teams, actually a sort of catalyst of bringing the best out of people. We haven't just changed in terms of having our interns in place from a Project Search point of view. I'll come on to some of the more sort of other changes that we've had in our team. Interns are proving that people with additional needs can make a valid contribution. Some of these sentences are a bit, I don't know, it feels like you shouldn't have to say it, but actually it's really beneficial from that point of view. And as I've already mentioned, supporting people to get into employment. And we've also done a lot of learning about our wider recruitment as a trust, our wider recruitment as a finance department, how we onboard colleagues, what we do in terms of our broader approach to learning, and some of the barriers that typically get put up in the workplace. Got a list of tasks that I'll just run through in terms of what your teams can benefit from, in terms of what we benefit from a project search point of view. So I think the first thing, rather than just the tasks, is don't underestimate someone's ability in amongst all of this in any sense. One of our interns has recently then rotated into our catering team. They were told that it would take 5 weeks for them to do the sort of catering hygiene, allergens sort of training that was in place. That colleague's done it in a week. There's something that we absolutely shouldn't underestimate any of our colleagues around some of this. So don't underestimate someone's ability. In particular, don't underestimate people's IT ability around stuff. It's one of the first things we had our project search interns doing would be around shredding, because I'm sure all of you have shredding to do in your organizations, and it's a job that we get our volunteers to do and other things. It feels like we're underestimating people's ability with some of that. And actually, and on the advert in terms of this going around, some of this is listed, but we've had work in terms of cleansing our supplier information in Oracle, reconcile transactional data, check different and identify differences between different data sets, summarize large volumes of invoices, lots of input into our pay budget setting process, which has been fantastic. They've assisted with a lot of payroll checking. And a really important job is they created our Christmas quiz, which was really good for our finance team, which is really important. Finally, the intern as well, just sort of making sure that they're gaining something for their CV moving forward. They completed the HFMA financial management qualification as part of all of this. That's really important for them. And actually, it's just really helpful that as a function, we have things like this that we can offer in finance. I know some others don't. So that's really useful. I think things to consider. You need a consistent place of work, and this might be a bit more challenging for organisations where you may not be back in the office, or in terms of some of the hybrid working stuff that is very much at the far end of being at home a lot of the time. So that is a challenge around this, and it's really important to establish a real key point of contact in amongst this. We have been really fortunate in our financial accounts team. We've had a colleague who's been in the office to support one of our more recent interns, really taking them under their wing, been really beneficial in that respect, but really being that keen link. It's really important to identify any additional equipment needs. And I think whilst there was some support when our most recent intern joined us to make sure that was in place, I'd make sure you go around that loop a few times in that. There's a bit around, I keep referring to this as the kind of office etiquette and kind of hygiene factors of the office. So post-COVID world, we're kind of used to, I don't know, some of you might be sat in your shorts at the moment, not necessarily in office attire, and various other things that kind of go with that kind of working day. They're very much a structure for our interns on this 9 to 3 working day, and looking at that kind of etiquette of the kind of good morning, goodbye sort of thing for people, which we take for granted a little bit. In certain places, I know of people who will slip out of work at the end of it. We all do, don't we? So there's a bit of making sure that we have that in place. The office attire bit I've mentioned, bits around mobile phone usage that you might take for granted as well, that are around how people work. And I think just probably for our team, it's probably been a bit of a reminder of things that you would just take for granted pre-COVID, but actually post-COVID and all the sort of hybrid work that goes with it, that some of it might have dropped off. I mentioned equipment. There's also just ensuring that the finance team or any team that people are in are aware of any special arrangements. Interns, for instance, who may need headphones, may prefer to wear headphones. I think there was some surprise at headphones. People thought that one of our recent interns was just sat there listening to music, which is not the case. So there's a bit of making sure that people around the individual are aware of these things to sort of work through. That's a bit of a list, and I thought what was probably more useful is a bit to bring this to life is just a bit of a snippet of some feedback that we've had on our most recent intern. I've taken their name out, so I refer to Eve quite a lot, so apologies about that, but I'll read this a bit verbatim because I think it's just a lovely sort of extract of things. So here we go. It soon became apparent that his meticulous approach and ability to use a split-screen computer display with all the accompanying shortcuts were going to make him an asset to the team. He was immediately made to feel very welcome by Karen and her colleagues, and the nurturing and supportive environment they created meant that he was given the time and space to work in an environment which accommodated his needs perfectly. In consequence, he soon blossomed into a confident and productive worker whose patience and excellent levels of concentration meant he relished going through invoices, looking for potential anomalies, and highlighting them to his colleagues when required. He also embraced a variety of tasks which are a fundamental part of office life and was very proud of the contribution he knew he was making to the effective running of the department. During the rotation, the transformation in him was remarkable. His confidence levels seemed to increase, and with each passing day, as he thrived in an environment where he was made to feel valued, he was able to showcase his remarkable abilities. This led to him changing from someone who presented as being quiet and reserved initially to someone who would set a quiz for the Christmas party and host it independently and also sing in Japanese to people if they asked him nicely. Which is just wonderful, isn't it? Around that brings sort of some of the things that I've just kind of listed boringly to life. Other feedback that we've had, I mentioned on a regular basis, Karen, my colleague Karen, who's been a real key link to this, would get regular feedback from his coach and from the college, and would receive various feedback. It was very much a sort of two-way process. From our most recent interns, built confidence and motivation, thrived in the workplace, sense of belonging, and enjoyable. From our staff, which I think is I can't emphasize enough the benefits that it's had to our teams. Rewarding to be part of the project, feel like we have made a real difference. Willingness to try any task presented, important member of the team, and visible increase in social interaction. And then just a lovely bit from one of the interns' mums. I cannot speak highly enough of the people involved in Project Search. For the first time, I am looking to my son's future with a feeling of optimism, which is just wonderful, isn't it? We're all finance people, so we're all a bit factual, aren't we? So that's all lovely stuff. So factual stuff on the back of this that helps the sort of business plan of this. So in terms of outcomes, so there's lots of research on this. Project Search website we'll share after this that you can go on, look into. 60% of people involved in Project Search enter full-time employment after their internship. 70% gain some sort of employment with an average working hours of 24 hours a week. Average salary for colleagues is £8.71. That was in 2021. That doesn't sound much. I double take that thinking what's going on. You've got to remember the sort of that's for all of these, it's about 20% higher than the national minimum wage or the national living wage, depending on their age or age and year comparison. So there's a bit to work through there. In terms of those who are on the programme from Project Search nationally, when they've done some research on this, 56% feel happier after the programme, 60% feel more independent, 69% have higher self-esteem than after the programme than beforehand. And I think there's a sort of real key thing for the sort of wider benefits. So quite clearly from the point of view of getting someone into a workplace, the 25 hours a week that these colleagues that these interns are doing releases carers time, releases people back into their lives. And for those who are carers will know this, for those who aren't, that will have clearly read about this, the kind of impact that being a carer has on individuals. So releasing that back is really important. There's the obvious financial benefits. If someone is in work, then less likely to need universal credit, everything else that sort of feeds through on that. And just overall, a wider contribution to the workplace. A bit for us in finance, I've already mentioned a bit of a reminder of how we sort of are in the office, or how we behave, how we are sort of civil to each other and everything else that kind of goes with that. By civil, I don't mean that people in Harrogate are uncivil. I mean just polite things of saying hello, goodbye, and everything else that goes with things. I think there's a real reminder to all of that for all of us. There's bits where we've changed our approach to recruitment, and this doesn't just feed through for finance, but feeds through to our total organisation. If you think about how we typically recruit people in the NHS, we first of all use the fortress that is NHS Jobs, which is a way of keeping everyone away, isn't it? Unless you're part of the NHS. And then we do odd things. So, I look at one of our medical records job descriptions. Band 2 job description has in desirable experience, experience of using ERS and ICS. Doesn't say what ERS or ICS is. Doesn't actually then describe any of what it is as an acronym. So we, again, bar people from it. But there's a desirable criteria on a Band 2 job. I struggle with it. We should be a real focus on our values overall, trying to recruit people across the board with the right values. And it's something that we've absolutely embraced in terms of where we are in Harrogate, and in particular in our finance team, making sure that we have that kind of values-based approach, all aspects of society that we serve, drawing people in and making sure that we represent in our workforce the people and patients that we serve. There's a lot in here that I've described what's not to like about it, I suppose. We've benefited enormously, and I'm sure others could do as well. I've talked for a bit there, so I'm going to stop talking. I'm happy to sort of take questions, discussions. I cannot answer everything, unfortunately. We'd hope to have some Project Search colleagues on the call. There is a Project Search event itself today, which means that they are double booked, so we can take questions back. I might defer to Karen a bit. But yes, thank you for listening to me for 15 or 20 minutes.
If there's any questions, I think there's Elena.
Morning. Yeah, hi, I'm Elena Mitchell from Royal Cornwall Hospitals Trust down in Cornwall. So a little bit further away from all of you, but yeah, really interested to hear about this project. We're doing a lot of work in our finance department around equality and diversity, and really trying to push ourselves into what we need to do differently. So this is really fascinating. I guess, I'm interested to kind of know how this went from an idea into reality, and kind of how you brought people along that journey with you. Really, that'd be interesting to hear a bit about.
Yeah, so I'll start, and then Karen, if there's anything you want to add, feel free to. There is, I think overall, so Project Search, as I say, we're not the first NHS organisation who's been part of the Project Search programme. I think, unless someone's got their hand up who's going to correct me, we're one of the first organisations who've embraced it in our corporate, and in particular in the finance area. There was some senior ownership around this, some senior drive around this. So we were aware of other places. As I say, our director of strategy brought it into to sort of the connection, and it was a reaching out to Project Search in the first place, a bit of a background information around everything, and then interest from ourselves. So probably, Elena, same journey in our team about how we sort of bring forward some of our EDI agenda, and I want to sort of, first of all, broaden our workforce, but also you will all suffer, won't we, from challenges in terms of filling vacancies, gaps and everything else. The more that we can sort of open that pool of talent, the better, I think, in that respect. So some senior ownership around it, some sharing of information, and a want and a desire to do it. I don't know, Karen, there's probably more technical stuff to that, is there? But would you add anything?
Yeah, I think the important thing is the whole finance team, in terms of the senior finance team, wanted to be part of this project, which then makes it obviously easier to then go out to the teams to sort of say, oh, actually, we now have an intern and we now would like to accommodate them. But everybody was really keen to be part of this project, because I think everyone saw the benefit that we could offer to an individual, and we wanted to be part of that. It's been a fantastic scheme to be part of, to be honest. I think it's one of the most rewarding things we've done as a finance team.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you.
We've got a question from Richard.
Hi everyone, thanks for that, Jordan. Really good overview. So we've had a previous chat about it. I'm that interested to get this in place. Just a couple of practicalities. So have you done it kind of one intern at a time? Have you done it on a rolling basis? And the other thing, I think you said the year is 3 placements. So do you almost have a bit of structure within your finance team, like 4 months in accounts payable, 4 months in payroll, but with one individual training manager as such to give the point of consistency?
So overall, as a trust, we've got 4 we've got 4 interns in the trust overall at the moment. They started, one individual would be in finance. We've had someone on our medical records team, someone in our cancer centre, and someone with our hotel services team. So in terms of trust-wide, that kind of rotation through, Karen, would you mind picking up the sort of more mechanics of how we've dealt with it in the team? We've got Karen's been a real key point of contact, as I keep telling you, everyone. I'm deferring to her a lot on her, so you can tell who's the brains behind this operation. But Karen, do you want to pick that up?
Yeah, so I think the interns are given some options in terms of where they would prefer to take out their placement. I think because we expressed an interest that we would happily accommodate somebody, that's why finance was sort of then put on the agenda. And I think that's probably the key point, is saying that as a finance function, we're willing here to support, and then giving the interns the opportunity to then choose you as a department to come and work in. And I think that's a little bit about us promoting ourselves as an opportunity. We based our intern in sort of the financial accounts team, but actually the work they did was across our entire finance department. I think the key was having them go to the same office, sit at the same seat, so that they felt comfortable quickly. So we didn't sort of move them around too much, but they did work on behalf of the entire team.
That makes sense. Thanks, Karen.
We have got a question in the chat from Claire, who says, for organisations such as charities, for example, will they be able to access Project Search?
I think the short answer, Claire, is yes. The best thing to do is to reach out to Project Search. We, like I said in the presentation, we'll share the links to it. Some of the NHS side of this was sort of pump primed a little bit by NHS England in terms of the mechanics of it. Project Search do more than just an NHS side of thing. If you go on the website, the list sort of involvement with voluntary organisations, local authorities, through to sort of Department of Work and Pensions, or whatever that's called these days, in that respect. So there's lots of links out there, and their real overall aim is to get individuals into work, not just into the sort of health sector or anything else. Into about 30% of the interns are based in an NHS organisation in the UK, but I'm sure they'd be keen to sort of broaden that across the board.
I'm just reading in the chat box, there's some really nice comments and suggestions from people, what they want to do or what they're going to do. I don't know if you can see them, Jordan or Karen.
Yeah, there's some fantastic stuff. So just from Lewis, I presume that's working with the local authority on that project, MEAM, ensuring younger generation. Any
Make Every Adult Matter. They're doing a lot of work with that, so it'd be good to really join up the two, perhaps. And
there's loads of really good research and write-ups on this. So if you go on Project Search website or other websites, there's lots of stuff in sort of Scottish background, Welsh backgrounds in terms of the work that's been happening in their organisations as well. Yeah.
Is there any further questions? Oh, one's just come in from Heidi. Can interns apply to access the work, for example, to get taxis to and from?
I do not know the answer to that question, Heidi, but I will make sure that I will ask someone from Project Search, because they offer lots of support, and it'll be the sort of thing that that Patrick from the Project Search team would have answered in seconds. But it is a good question. I'll make sure it's picked up as part of when we circulate some links of various things.
I think we've got a hand up from Alan.
Hi there, Alan Patchy from West Suffolk NHS Foundation Trust. I'm Senior Contract Manager in Finance. What work did you have to do around unconscious bias and that continual education process where people might not understand someone who has autism, or indeed the way that they're working, their place in the office and so on? I'm interested in that aspect.
I think there's lots of broader work that we're doing on unconscious bias anyway, so that the whole of this sort of feeds into not just for this project. You've disappeared from my screen. Around unconscious bias overall, Alan. So there's a lot of work that we've been doing in some of our team timeouts around equality, diversity, inclusion, about highlighting some of the issues around unconscious bias overall. And I suppose it sort of feeds into a little bit of my overall view of a lot of the equality, diversity, inclusion agenda is that some of the you can always deal with the most obvious things that are issues, but actually some of the things that are the most detrimental to anyone who comes from any sort of any background where there is an issue of not from an EDI perspective, is those unconscious biases that can day to day have an impact on an individual and not allow them to flourish in the way that they can do. So that it's not just been something on this. I did mention in the presentation, though, there are some key things that are being upfront with your team about, like the earphones example, for instance. I think we took that a little bit for granted, and I think it's a real practical example of how the whole bit around unconscious bias comes to life for our teams rather than it just being theoretical. So apologies, that was a bit of a ramble, but I think that's more, it feeds into the wider bit of work we've done from an EDI perspective as part of our team.
Thanks, Jordan. We've got another question from the chat from Graham. Did you encounter any challenges and how did you overcome them?
Thanks, Graham. Looking forward to that whole university teaching hospitals turning into Harrogate and District Foundation Trust in the near future, which will be good. In terms of challenges, I think we've been really fortunate in, as Karen mentioned earlier, a real want by our team to do some of this and to take some of it forward. I don't have anything that I would describe as challenges to start with, because I think Project Search have been so helpful in facilitating this. I think, as I said, people keep telling me you need to put a bit of effort in the start. This has felt one of the more effortless ways of bringing someone into the workplace. Karen, is there anything that I have glaringly missed on that?
I think, to be honest, the way we all work now in terms of hybrid model, I think that was probably the most challenging part in terms of how do we make sure we accommodate somebody and make sure they've got regular support and a key contact on site Monday to Friday. So, but we were fortunate in the sense that we have got a couple of teams who are on site. So that was probably the most sort of obvious one I can think of. I think the most important thing is making sure all the teams are fully aware that we have an intern in place and some of the background. Looking back, I wish we'd known a little bit more about our intern before they started with us. Not in a bad way, just to make sure that we were fully aware, for example, wanting to wear headphones to help with the sensory perspective, you know, and it would have just been nice to have been made aware of that at the beginning instead of sort of a couple of weeks in. But no, we've been really lucky, and we haven't really incurred any other sort of significant challenges.
We've got a hand up from Anis.
Hi, I'm Anis Chowdhury. I'm at Whittington NHS Trust, which is in North London. You maybe answered a bit of my question when you said you didn't really come across many challenges, but were there any sort of cost implications, either as a in general for taking on any learning disability placements, or for a specific case? I mean, obviously, I don't need details of, but just what cost implications were.
In terms of material costs, I think the answer is no to that. I think there's a bit of the cost of, as you do with anyone coming into your workplace, whether it's someone who is doing work placement, whether it's someone who's an apprentice, whether it's a fixed term contract, there is effort that you have to put in there, isn't there, inside of this. I think what's really helpful with making the link with the local college and with Project Search is some of the advice that you then get on what are reasonable adjustments and guiding you to the right place. Because I think sometimes you can end up being clumsy around reasonable adjustments, and sometimes you can end up spending far more time, effort, and money around some of those things that sort of pull through. So I think that's been a real benefit to this, Anis, rather than necessarily those kind of direct costs of, other than the fact that you've got someone in your workplace who you are in effect employing, aren't you, for that period of time. So there's been far greater financial benefit to this than it has been in terms of detriment overall.
Thanks.
Does that pick up your question?
Yeah, thanks.
And there's a nice comment, I think, in the chat, which I missed at the very start of this, just Jamie from Manchester, that, as I mentioned earlier, that sort of exact championing, but also that senior leadership, I think it's really important to this, because if you don't have that buy-in, I think that's where some of these things kind of run aground a little bit.
Have we got any other questions, either hand raising or in the comments? If not, we can close the session. Thank you, Jordan and Karen, for today. It's been really interesting and helpful. I'm sure everyone would agree. I've recorded it, so I'll be putting it up on the One NHS website. And if Jordan and Karen have any extra links they'd like to send me, I can circulate to everyone as well. But thank you very much. One last question from Jamie in the chat box, saying he'd be happy to talk over anything.
Yeah,
so his email's there.
Absolutely, great. Yeah, good.
Perfect. We draw the session to a close. Thank you very much.
Thanks,
And have a
everyone.
lovely
Much
afternoon.
appreciated. Enjoy your weekends and all that sort of great stuff when it gets here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.
Thank you, bye.
Bye.
Thank you both. Have you got any extra links you have that you wanted to send me and I can circulate?
Should we just send through that final, of the stuff we prepped, Karen, that final slide? It's got a link to Project Search and got a couple of the case studies that are on the website that are really helpful. Yeah, hope that was all right, Natasha.
No, that was really good. And like lots of questions, which is really good. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for letting us be part of this. That's been really helpful. Really enjoyed it. It's been good to pull it together and showcase a bit of Harrogate as well, which is